Mayor Walsh recently signed a law that puts new limits on diesel emissions in Boston. Environmental groups blame those emissions for health problems and climate change. But for many people in Boston, the city's action marks a gain for environmental justice, and that includes the nonprofit based in Roxbury, Alternatives for Community and Environment. We'd like to welcome its executive director, Kalila Barnett. Thank you very much for being with us, Kalila.
Thanks for having me.
Get into a little more detail. This is a grassroots campaign, so why did it get started? What was the concern about this?
Yeah, so ACE has been around for about 20 years, and for a good portion of that time, we have been teaching an environmental justice curriculum in Boston public schools. And so this is with middle school students, elementary school students, high school students. And we were in a class over 16 years ago and talking with students and noticed that a lot of the students and their families were suffering from asthma. And so began to look at what were the environmental triggers that were causing these problems amongst the students. And so at the time, a lot of bus depots, a lot of trucks coming in and out of the neighborhood, and there were all diesel vehicles. And so the students decided they wanted to do something to address this problem and to try to figure out how to get the anti-idling law that was already in the books in Massachusetts actually enforced.
Of course, what these vehicles do, they're not just speeding through. I mean, rush hour in the morning, you know, things move pretty slowly, whether it's Grove Hall, Dudley Square. So there's a lot of, they stop and then they start again.
Exactly, especially for the buses. So over the course of the lifetime of our work around this, many changes have happened. So we know that the MBTA's bus fleet is much cleaner than it used to be. Many Boston public school buses have been retrofitted and have changed. And then a couple of years ago, garbage haulers in and around the city, the largest ones, received a contract from federal stimulus grant to be able to do some retrofitting as well. So they're definitely still around, but the impact of them has lessened because of the work of ACE and our partners.
The city can do something with its own vehicles and maybe even with vehicles used by its contractors. So how does this new ordinance change things?
Yeah, so it is focused primarily on construction vehicles. And so that's sort of one of the last kind of major pieces of work, if you will. And so the city has regular vehicles, construction vehicles, and also emergency vehicles that it uses that have diesel engines. Emergency vehicles are exempted from this ordinance, but for other ones that are used on a regular basis by the city, this ordinance requires that they be retrofitted. A certain percentage that would happen in this year, and then more over the coming 3 fiscal years for the city.
I've seen idling vehicles myself, and I sometimes wonder why that's happening. Maybe it's cold outside and the driver's trying to keep warm, or it's hot and they've got the air conditioner on, but how do you enforce against it? I mean, who's going to keep track of that?
It's a great question. So we're in partnership with the city. We are, hoping to develop an implementation plan for this that really works for contractors and for the communities involved. And so it's going to increase enforcement powers from within the city. So there's an air pollution control commission that actually does give out tickets. It's a very small department within the city, but they are able to give out tickets for this. The police department is also going to become involved in giving out tickets for idling as well as some folks within the transportation department. So it increases the enforcement powers within the city. And so our hope is that power can be used to really focus in on construction vehicles and other idling trucks around the neighborhood.
One of your other environmental justice campaigns concerns access to public transportation, especially for young people in Boston. Yeah. They've been working on this for quite a while, and I guess you've got something coming up pretty soon. Yeah,
so we actually just are starting signups for a pilot around the Youth Pass. And so it's been many years in the making, but the T and MassDOT made a commitment to do a pilot program for young people, not just within the city of Boston, but a few other cities and towns in the greater Boston area. So they would get a discounted pass. We would be able to track how they use it, how effective it is. And so that pilot is starting up really soon, and it goes until next year. And so we're really excited about that.
I know with this environmental thinking that we have these days, we have more transit-oriented development, so there wouldn't have to be as much reliance on cars. It's nice to have the new housing, but real estate values are going up around it, and you're worried about displacement. So you got to do something to help some of the tenants, I guess, who could be displaced.
Yeah, definitely. So of concern to ACE and many of our grassroots organizing partners across the city is the threats that folks are facing from the rising cost of housing and transportation as well. And so we work with a coalition called the Right to the City Alliance. And so one of the specific measures that we're actively exploring is just cause evictions. And so that would require that landlords actually have a reason in order to evict tenants from the property. And so this ordinance, which we're looking to file sometime next year, would be focused largely on corporate landlords. So we know that there's a lot of really good homeowners and landlords across the city of Boston who have been providing safe and affordable housing for residents for a really long time. And we want those folks to be involved in this effort. And we find a lot of problems with corporate landlords and other investors buying up blocks of houses and then coming in and evicting people for reasons we consider to be unjust. Chris,
the other issue here is that you've got tenants who've been paying rent, but the rent goes up dramatically, but you also have buyers who say, well, the values are going up, we've got to pass on some of that expense.
Right. So I think this is the part where we're interested in being in relationship and in conversations with landlords who have a commitment to being in the city of Boston long-term, being in neighborhoods long-term, and it benefits landlords as well to have a stabilized neighborhood.
Another issue coming up is community gardens, and there's a long history of gardens stabilizing neighborhoods, improving the quality of life, being good for the environment.
Yes.
But now the city wants to use some of that garden space on Magnolia Street for some new housing, which is also a good thing. So what's going to happen?
I don't know. There's a kickoff community conversation, community planning series that starts this coming Tuesday. And so this is a lot that's over off of Dudley Street in Roxbury. And so we think that a number of the folks that we have connected with who actually have garden plots are going to be coming out to that meeting and advocating for that garden to stay. There's a bunch of lots that the Department of Neighborhood Development is looking to redevelop. And so, I think that there's an opportunity for many people to get many things that they want, including both gardens and housing.
Explain the importance of these gardens. They look nice, and you can say they're a hobby, but I think there's also something more essential than just a hobby going on here.
Definitely. I mean, one of the reasons that we started this campaign was there's a lot of vacant land that's left over, particularly Roxbury, Dorchester, remnants of urban renewal, of the sort of insurance scams, people burning down houses. And so we end up with a lot of vacant land that is not very well kept up. Absentee landlords, some smaller properties that maybe the city hasn't paid a lot of attention to. And so these gardens allow residents to collectively care for that land. So a land that was once overgrown, that was a place for trash and misdeeds, becomes a place where the community can gather to build relationships and to grow food that directly impacts their quality of life, because it increases folks' ability to provide vegetables for their families.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
From ACE, Kalila, Barnett. We'll have more news in just a moment.